Well, they freaking did it, ladies and gentlemen. I thought this wasn't gonna happen. There was no way of me really anticipating this, but yeah. Probably my biggest complaint with the M1 iPad Pro was just solved very quietly, very anonymously, and without much attention, so I'm doing a video on it. ProRes support is now on iPadOS. Let's begin. Okay, so without question, this has instantly become my favorite feature of iPadOS 15 because everything else kinda sucked, honestly, and I'm not that impressed. I've been running the beta for the past few months. Nothing really changed much. I just got lots more dots in the corners, and I accidentally set off quick notes all the time when I don't mean to. But what made the absolute least amount of sense with iPadOS for me that was so frustrating when I was trying to review my mini LED iPad Pro earlier this year was simply the fact that Apple designs their own video codec, right? And that's the kind I shoot at. All of my videos are recorded at ProRes. It edits so efficiently in the Final Cut timeline on my Mac, and yet despite giving Thunderbolt in the M1 chip to the iPad Pro, very powerful I/O, very powerful CPU, suddenly you can't edit Apple's own formats. And yet they own every aspect of this process. They own the video codec, they own the hardware, they own the CPU, they own the I/O. Maybe not as directly, but you know, they have complete control over everything, and yet I couldn't put Apple's own video format on the iPad to edit. Now quietly, through an iOS update, I didn't actually see this in the release notes or anything. It was actually confirmed to me via a fan on Twitter who said that Apple has added ProRes support to the iPad at the same time as Apple added ProRes support to iMovie in the Clips app, but all anyone was talking about was how that was brought to the iPhone, because of course later this fall, the Pro iPhones are gonna get ProRes video support, so Apple was like, I guess now we can flip the switch. This proves to me that it took very little effort and required very little time and attention for Apple to just go, you know, we should probably support ProRes. So as they were flipping the switch on iOS, they quietly flipped the switch on the iPad, and sure enough, I plugged in my CFast card reader into my iPad Pro, loaded some Blackmagic footage right in there, and it shows up now in LumaFusion, and it looks so crispy, it looks so golden, it looks so good, and the hilarious thing is, the A12X chip from my 3-year-old iPad Pro is still pretty dang capable, so spoiler alert, this entire tech video was edited on my iPad Pro from 2018. Now, thankfully, this is possible because of one small little update that has now made iPadOS capable of supporting more Pro video formats, and I don't know why Apple didn't do this sooner. It seemed like it took them no time at all. They had already optimized, you know, the entire macOS platform for Apple Silicon, so I don't know what was so difficult about getting ProRes to play on Apple Silicon. And on top of that, I'm kind of filled with regret. I'll be honest with you. You know, I was trying to justify earlier this year, really trying to justify keeping that iPad Pro. You know, I had this $350 keyboard case, I had this great mini LED display, I loved Center Stage, I loved Face ID, and I had this great hardware combo, and I was like, if this could edit my videos, I could maybe justify keeping it, but because it didn't have ProRes support, and of course we would still love Final Cut or a dual boot macOS option, there's still a long way for iPadOS to go, but for me personally, this was a major deal breaker feature that they've now rolled out to the point that if I would have known ProRes support was coming, I am not sure if I would have sold my keyboard case or if I would have returned the iPad Pro. I frankly could have justified keeping it had this feature been out earlier, and I was thinking about it, you know, I was thinking to myself, well, they didn't talk about ProRes support coming, and it might come out someday as just a tiny incremental upgrade, and I wasn't expecting it to come out so soon, but similar to what Marquez tells all of us, I was just not buying a product anticipating a software update to come later that would make it more useful. I tried to stay true to that ideology and say to myself, no, Drew, this isn't gonna get better. iPadOS is still gonna be fundamentally limited. So way back in, you know, April and May, there was no way of me knowing that Apple was gonna bring ProRes to the iPhone and then indirectly bring ProRes to the iPad that way. The leaks about ProRes coming to the iPhone weren't even out back then yet. So even the leak community was not alluding to the idea of iPad eventually getting ProRes. I thought we were basically gonna have to wait until iPadOS 16 or iPadOS 17. So regret is not, you know, a productive or helpful emotion, but it's definitely one I'm feeling right now because I think my iPad could have been far more capable had I kept the keyboard case or even kept the M1 iPad Pro, now knowing I can put ProRes video support from my Blackmagic cameras onto it. But the A12X chip is still pretty good, still fairly powerful, and while I would love to try to do more more of an iPad Pro only transition. Now knowing I'd have to buy a whole new keyboard case, and knowing that M1X MacBook Pros are probably going to be launching next month or soon thereafter, it's kind of too late, honestly. Like, I feel somewhat regret for not keeping the iPad Pro M1, but simultaneously I'm thinking, you know, there's probably new MacBook Pros coming out anyway. That's going to have Mac OS, so I can do everything iPadOS is still not capable of, and cover all the shortcomings that iPadOS 15 still has to this day. So it's a tad too late, but I'm just trying to say, Apple, you shouldn't have waited to bring this feature, because if you would have had this earlier, I definitely would have kept the M1 iPad Pro. But now that you've taken so long, we're so close to MacBook season, I think I'm just gonna wait for that anyway. Let me know what you guys think of ProRes support coming to the iPad Pro. This is your Alp Sheep here. We'll see you guys in the next one.